The early life of Blackbeard remains shrouded in mystery. Historians speculate that he was born around 1680, making him between 35 and 40 years old at the time of his death. Throughout historical records, he goes by various names, most commonly Blackbeard, Edward Thatch, or Edward Teach, with the latter being the predominant. Pirates often adopted aliases to protect their reputations and their family, making it rather challenging to uncover Blackbeard's true identity. But that is just what we are going to do today, at least to the best of our ability, with the information available to us. So welcome to the channel. If it's your first time here, it's good to see you, and if you're coming back, it's good to have you here again. If you'd like to support the channel, head on over to the Patreon, where you can find all of the videos ad-free. Otherwise, help me in the algorithm with a like, comment, and subscribe, as this helps push the channel out to more people on YouTube. Without further ado, let's begin. Teach likely grew up in Bristol, a bustling seaport during the 17th century due to Britain's colonial expansions and the flourishing Atlantic slave trade. Bristol was England's second largest city at that time, and was a constant bustle with maritime activity and trade. Teach probably received some level of education, which was evident from his ability to read and write, skills that in his time were certainly not taken for granted. His interactions with merchants and the possession of official correspondence from high-ranking officials indicate a possible upbringing in a respectable and affluent family. Speculation suggests that Teach may have had privileged origins, but this is indeed just speculation. He was most likely of middle-class upbringing. It is believed that Teach ventured into the Caribbean during the late 17th century, possibly arriving on a merchant vessel, or perhaps even a slave ship. According to the 18th century source Charles Johnson, Teach had spent some time serving as a sailor in Jamaica, engaged in privateering activities during the War of Spanish Succession. Johnson lauded Teach's bravery and valor in battle, suggesting that his reputation for audacity preceded his infamous private career. However, the specifics of Teach's involvement in the war, that being the War of Spanish Succession, and his life prior to piracy, remain pretty elusive, buried beneath the various layers of historical obscurity. Now, onto the West Indies, with its rich tapestry of colonialism, trade, and of course, piracy. A hotbed of piracy, by the way. It served as a vibrant stage for the maritime adventures during the 17th and 18th centuries. Amidst this tumultuous backdrop, Henry Jennings, a former privateer turned pirate, and his band of followers sought refuge in the uninhabited haven of New Providence. Situated strategically near the Florida Strait, New Providence provided easy access to bustling shipping routes frequented by European vessels crossing the Atlantic. Although its harbor could harbor hundreds of ships, it proved just a little bit too shallow for the imposing vessels of the Royal Navy. As George Woodberry eloquently describes, New Providence was no ordinary settlement, but rather a transient gathering spot, teeming with pirates, traders, and assorted hangers-on, where the rule of law took a back seat to lawlessness. Certainly sounds like a pirate hangout, don't you think? Among the colorful characters drawn to New Providence was none other than Blackbeard himself. Oh, throughout the essay we will interchange Teach and Blackbeard, as he was equally known by these names, so we will equally refer to him as such. Arriving from Jamaica shortly after the Treaty of Utrecht, Blackbeard, like many former privateers, transitioned seamlessly into the life of piracy. Around 1716, he found himself under the wing of Captain Benjamin Hornigold, a seasoned pirate who held sway over New Providence's pirate-friendly waters. Hornigold entrusted Blackbeard with the command of a sloop, that's a kind of ship, marking his official entry into his realm of piracy. In early 1717, Hornigold and Blackbeard embarked on a series of daring raids along the mainland coast. Their exploits included seizing a boat laden with flour from Havana, capturing wine from a Bermuda-bound sloop, and intercepting a vessel en route from Madeira to Charlestown, South Carolina. It's said that during these escapades, Blackbeard and his quartermaster, William Howard, struggled to rein in their unruly crews, perhaps fueled by their growing fondness for Madeira wine. It seems pirate stereotypes certainly do have their origins. Near Cape Charles on September 29th, they seized a vessel named the Betty of Virginia, absconding with its precious cargo of Madeira wine before scuttling the ship and its remaining supplies. During their joint venture, sailing under the banner of piracy, Blackbeard's presence began to assert itself as more than just a subordinate to Captain Hornigold. In a report filed by Captain Matthew Munthe, who was conducting anti-piracy patrols for North Carolina, Blackbeard, referred to as Thatch, was noted as commanding his own vessel, along with a formidable crew. Described as operating a sloop of 6 guns and about 70 men. Well, that's really not bad, isn't it? Seems that Blackbeard had clearly risen to prominence, at least within the pirate ranks. In September of that same year, Blackbeard and Hornigold crossed paths with Stede Bonnet, an unlikely pirate who hailed from a wealthy background. Bonnet, who had recently taken to piracy, found himself rather at odds with his crew, who were dissatisfied with his leadership. So, after having some conversations with Bonnet about how to fix this problem, Bonnet gave him reluctant permission to assume control of his ship, the Revenge, thereby expanding the pirates' fleet to 3 vessels. Alongside Blackbeard's original sloop and Hornigold's Ranger, they now formed a formidable force on the high seas. By October, their fleet had grown further with the capture of 2 additional vessels, the Robert of Philadelphia and the Good Intent of Dublin. Both were, of course, relieved of their valuable cargo. Hornigold's principles as a former British privateer dictated that he only targeted old adversaries. However, his crew, lured by the riches of passing aboard British vessels, grew a little restless. Eventually, toward the end of 1717, Hornigold's reluctance to engage British ships led to his demotion. Whether Blackbeard played a specific role in this decision is a little bit unclear. Nonetheless, Hornigold, disillusioned with piracy, decided to retire, taking with him the Ranger and one of the sloops. This marked the end of their partnership. I almost said pirate ship. As Hornigold, like many others in New Providence, opted to accept the king's pardon, leaving Blackbeard to navigate the treacherous waters of piracy alone. On November the 28th of 1717, Blackbeard's fleet struck boldly off the coast of St. Vincent, targeting a French merchant vessel named La Concorde. With a ferocious barrage from their cannons, Blackbeard's ships unleashed havoc, killing several crew members and compelling the ship's captain to surrender. La Concorde, originally an English merchant ship called Concorde, had fallen into French hands in 1711 and changed ownerships multiple times before ultimately falling prey to Blackbeard's crew. Sailing southward along St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they reached Bequia, where they unloaded the vessel's crew and cargo, transforming it into their own pirate flagship. The French crew, given one of Blackbeard's smaller sloops, renamed it Mauvais Rencontre, Bad Meeting, and set sail for Martinqueux. While some of the enslaved individuals aboard were possibly recruited into Blackbeard's crew, while the rest were left behind and later recaptured by the returning French crew. Blackbeard swiftly rechristened La Concorde as Queen Anne's Revenge, outfitting her with a formidable arsenal of 40 guns, and quite possibly the coolest name you could give to a pirate ship. Meanwhile, he entrusted his Lieutenant Richards with command of Stede Bonnet's ship, the Revenge. In late November, near St. Vincent, Blackbeard encountered Great Allen, engaging in a fierce battle that ultimately ended with the merchant ship's surrender. Blackbeard prominently ordered the vessel closer to shore, plundered its cargo holds, and then lit it on fire, reducing it to ashes. Now, this daring exploit garnered attention as far away as Boston, where the Boston News later hailed Blackbeard as the commander of a fearsome fleet comprising a French ship armed with 32 guns, a brigantine with 10 guns, and a sloop carrying 12 guns. By this juncture, Blackbeard's command had likely swelled to at least 150 men, spread across all 3 of his vessels. On December 5th, 1717, Blackbeard intercepted the merchant sloop Margaret near Crab Island off the coast of Anguilla. Capturing the vessel and its crew, Blackbeard and his men ransacked the sloop, holding the captain and crew captive for about 8 hours before allowing them to depart unharmed. The captain, Henry Bostock, prominently reported the encounter to Governor Walter Hamilton of St. Christopher Island, providing a detailed affidavit of the ordeal. Bostock recounted Blackbeard's formidable force, consisting of 2 vessels, a sloop, and a large French Guineaman, armed with 36 cannon and manned by, at this time, 300 crew members. Blackbeard's crew purportedly boasted of destroying numerous other ships and revealed plans to intercept a Spanish armada laden with treasure bound for Hispaniola. Additionally, Blackbeard showed very little surprise at the news of an impending royal pardon for pirates, indicating his awareness of the changing tides of fortune in the world of piracy. Now, Henry Bostock's detailed deposition not only sheds light on Blackbeard's formidable fleet and audacious plans, but it also provides the earliest recorded description of the notorious pirate's appearance, leading to the origin of his enduring nickname, Blackbeard. Bostock vividly described Blackbeard as a tall, spare man with a very black beard, which he wore very long. This marks the first documented account of Blackbeard's distinctive facial hair. Subsequent descriptions of Blackbeard's appearance add to the mystique surrounding him. Accounts mention his thick black beard, often braided into pigtails and adorned with colored ribbons, giving him a menacing and unmistakable visage. Although from that description, braided into pigtails with colorful ribbons, it doesn't sound very terrifying. But apparently it was, so we'll have to take their word for it. Charles Johnson, writing in 1724, depicted Blackbeard as a terrifying figure, likening him to a, quote, fury from hell. Although the accuracy of such descriptions remains somewhat uncertain. Yet it is very apparent that Blackbeard understood the power of his appearance, and used it to instill fear in his adversaries. Standing tall with broad shoulders, Blackbeard cut an imposing figure. He favored knee-length boots and dark attire, often complemented by a wide-brimmed hat, and sometimes a flamboyant coat of silk or velvet. In battle, he adorned himself with a sling carrying 3 brace of pistols, with lighted, slow matches tucked under his hat, enhancing his menacing aura. Now, you may be surprised to hear that despite his fearsome reputation, there are no confirmed accounts of Blackbeard inflicting any harm on the ones he held captive. However, his ruthlessness extended to his use of aliases, as evidenced by the encounters such as the one involving the Montserrat Merchant on November the 30th, where Blackbeard operated under the names Captain Kentish and Captain Edwards, the latter being known as an alias of the fellow pirate Stede Bonnet. So perhaps he did commit some atrocities, but we'll never really know, as when you do it under a different name, we can't really prove that it was or was not him. Between late 1717 and early 1718, Blackbeard kind of disappeared. His whereabouts remained cloaked in a large amount of uncertainty. However, it's likely that he and Stede Bonnet were behind an attack off St. Eustatius in December 1717, Reports suggest that they intended to head towards the Spanish-controlled Samana Bay in Hispaniola, but no evidence of pirate activity was found in the area. Captain Hume of HMS Scarborough reported on February 6, 1718, the presence of a pirate ship of 36 guns and 250 men, and a sloop of 10 guns and 100 men, cruising among the Leeward Islands. If those numbers sound familiar, that's why we're mentioning it. Despite efforts to track down the vessels, they, however, proved to be elusive. However, it was discovered that the two ships had sunk a French vessel off St. Christopher Island and were last seen heading down the north side of Hispaniola. Although not confirmed, many do believe these ships were under the command of Blackbeard and Bonnet. In March 1718, while replenishing supplies off Turnip Island east of Belize, Blackbeard's fleet encountered the Jamaican logwood-cutting sloop the Adventure. After inviting its captain, Harriet, to join them, Blackbeard took control of the Adventure, appointing Israel Hands as captain. They set sail for the Bay of Honduras, where they expanded their fleet by adding another ship and 4 sloops. On the 9th of April, Blackbeard's fleet plundered and burned the Protestant Caesar before moving on to capture a smaller turtler at Grand Cayman. From there they likely headed towards Havana, seizing a small Spanish vessel along the way. Their journey took them to the wrecks of the 1715 Spanish fleet off the eastern coast of Florida, where Blackbeard disembarked the crew of the captured Spanish sloop. They then set course for the port of Charlestown, South Carolina, attacking 3 vessels along the way. Blackbeard's audacious exploits continued to strike fear into the hearts of all who crossed his path, and by this time his reputation of one of the most notorious pirates of the Caribbean was all completely solidified. By the May of 1718, Blackbeard had boldly elevated himself to the rank of Commodore, reaching the pinnacle of his power and influence in the Caribbean. In a daring move late that month, his fleet actually blockaded the port of Charlestown in South Carolina, effectively seizing control of maritime traffic in the area. With no guard ship to defend the port, Blackbeard's fleet began its ruthless operation. All vessels attempting to enter or leave the port were intercepted and boarded by Blackbeard's crew. The pilot boat, the first victim of his blockade, was swiftly captured, setting the tone for the days to come. Over the next 5 to 6 days, around 9 ships fell prey to Blackbeard's marauding fleet as they attempted to navigate past Charlestown Bar, where his ships lay in wait. Among the captured ships was the Crowley, bound for London with esteemed citizens of Charlestown, including Samuel Wragg, a member of the Province of Carolina's Council. Passengers were interrogated about the vessels still harbored in port, and then confined below deck for a harrowing half-day. Blackbeard then issued an ultimatum, demanding medical supplies from the colonial government of South Carolina. Failure to comply would of course result in the execution of all prisoners, along with the destruction of the captured ships. Faced with Blackbeard's ruthless resolve, Rag had no choice but to capitulate and agree to his demands. A Mr. Marks, accompanied by 2 pirates, was dispatched to procure the required medicine. Meanwhile, Blackbeard's fleet shifted position, anchoring just a few leagues from the land. Despite a delayed return, Blackbeard granted a brief reprieve, but the medical supplies failed to arrive as promised. In a dramatic turn of events, Blackbeard convened a meeting with his crew, directing 8 ships to advance into the harbor, sending panic rippling through the town. When Marks finally returned with the medicine, he recounted his ordeal of locating the elusive pirates, who had been waylaid by drink-fueled revelry with friends. That's right, they were too busy partying on shore to get back and fulfill their obligations. Once again, the pirate stereotype certainly comes from somewhere. True to his word, Blackbeard upheld the agreement, releasing the captured ships and their passengers, albeit relieved of their valuables, including their fine clothing. Blackbeard's audacious blockade of Charlestown showcased his formidable command and unwavering determination to extract concessions by any means necessary, solidifying his reign of terror. While docked in Charlestown, Blackbeard also received some alarming news. Woodes Rogers, dispatched from England with a squadron of men of war, was en route to cleanse the West Indies of pirates. Sensing the imminent threat, Blackbeard swiftly made plans to evade capture. Well, next, in a daring move, Blackbeard's fleet sailed northward along the Atlantic coast, eventually anchoring in Topsail Inlet off the coast of North Carolina. It's also known as Beaufort Inlet. Their intention was to careen their ships, a process of scraping the hulls to remove barnacles and other debris. However, they didn't have time to do this, because on June the 10th, 1718, a disaster struck when Blackbeard's flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, ran aground on a treacherous sandbar. The impact managed to crack her main mast and cause severe damage to her timbers. Desperate to flee the vessel, Blackbeard ordered several sloops to assist in the effort, throwing ropes across the stranded flagship. However, their attempts proved futile, and another sloop commanded by Israel Hans of the Adventure also found itself grounded. Both vessels appeared to be in dire straits at this point, their damages seemingly beyond repair, leaving Blackbeard with only the Revenge and the captured Spanish sloop as viable options for his dwindling fleet. This unexpected turn of events threatened to jeopardize Blackbeard's plans and left him vulnerable to the impending threat posed by Woodes Rogers and his formidable armada. It was one thing to raid the trade ships and cargo sloops. It was another to go up against a militarized force of the British Navy. At some point, Blackbeard learned of the royal pardon offer, and likely shared his inclination to accept it with Stede Bonnet. The pardon, available to pirates who surrendered by September 5, 1718, provided immunity for crimes committed before January 5th of the same year. Well, despite the potential risk posed by their actions at Charlestown Bar, Blackbeard and Bonnet believed that the conditions could be waived, especially considering their trust in the governor Charles Eden. To test the waters, Blackbeard waited to observe the fate of another captain who was on his way to take up the governor's offer. Meanwhile, Bonnet wasted absolutely no time and promptly departed for Bathtown, where he surrendered to Governor Eden and received his unconditional pardon. Upon returning to Beaufort Inlet to reunite with his crew aboard the Revenge, Bonnet discovered Blackbeard had stripped the vessel of its valuables and provisions, leaving the crew marooned. Enraged, Bonnet sought revenge, but failed to locate Blackbeard. He was long gone by now. Well, you see, Stede Bonnet was so angry with this situation that he made it his personal endeavor to go and find Blackbeard and get his vengeance. This unfortunately led him back into a life of piracy, where he ultimately met his demise at the hands of authorities. Should have just let it go. It's suggested that Blackbeard and Israel Hands intentionally ran the ships aground to reduce the fleet's crew complement, thereby increasing their share of the spoils. During the trial of Bonnet's crew, Revenge's boatswain Ignatius Pell testified that Blackbeard orchestrated the grounding of the ship. Before sailing northward to Ocracoke Inlet, Blackbeard marooned approximately 25 men on a small sandy island to silence any potential dissenters. He then proceeded to Bath, where he and his diminished crew received their pardon from Governor Eden shortly after Bonnet's departure. Blackbeard settled in Bath, intermittently traveling between his base in the town and his sloop off Ocracoke. Despite rumors of marriage to a local plantation owner's daughter, there's no concrete evidence to support this claim. Granted permission, then, by Eden to seek a privateer commission in St. Thomas, Blackbeard was officially titled captain of his remaining sloop, which he renamed Adventure. However, it didn't last very long. Returning to piracy by the end of August, Blackbeard's exploits continued, with the governor of Pennsylvania issuing a warrant for his arrest. By September, Blackbeard informed Eden of his encounter with a deserted French ship at sea, which led Vice Admiralty Court awarding him and his crew the ship's remaining cargo. Now, Ocracoke Inlet served as Blackbeard's preferred anchorage, providing an ideal vantage point for spotting ships traveling between northeast Carolina settlements. It was there that Blackbeard first encountered Charles Vane's approaching ship, marking the beginning of a new chapter in his piracy saga. Accompanied by notorious figures like Israel Hands, Robert Deal, and Calico Jack, Blackbeard's rendezvous with Vane signaled the convergence of two formidable forces in the world of piracy. As news of Blackbeard and Charles Vane's gathering spread through neighboring colonies, the governor of Pennsylvania grew increasingly alarmed, dispatching 2 sloops in an attempt to capture the pirates. Despite their efforts, the pirates evaded capture. Meanwhile, Governor Alexander Spotswood of Virginia grew concerned about reports of retired pirates residing in nearby North Carolina. Some of Blackbeard's former crew had even settled in Virginian seaports, prompting Spotswood to issue a proclamation requiring former pirates to surrender themselves, relinquish their weapons, and avoid traveling in groups larger than 3. Spotswood, distrustful of North Carolina's ability to fully control the pirates, suspected they would return to piracy once their funds depleted. For the most part, he was correct in this assumption. Learning that William Howard, former quartermaster of the Queen Anne's Revenge, was in the vicinity, Spotswood had him and his slaves arrested under suspicion of knowing Blackbeard's whereabouts. Despite lacking legal authority to try pirates, Spotswood attempted to prosecute Howard. However, Howard's attorney challenged the legality of his arrest, and this led to a rather lengthy legal battle. Spotswood's counsel argued that the governor had the right to try pirates without a jury during times of crisis, citing Blackbeard's presence as such a crisis. Charges against Howard included acts of piracy committed after the pardon's deadline, but Howard's attorney contested the charges, leading to a standoff. Ultimately, Howard was spared from the noose due to a commission from London pardoning acts of piracy committed before August 18, 1718. Gleaning valuable information from Howard, Spotswood planned to capture Blackbeard and his crew, gaining support from individuals seeking to discredit the North Carolina governor. Personally financing the operation, Spotswood orchestrated a multi-pronged approach involving land and sea forces. Lieutenant Robert Maynard of HMS Pearl was tasked with leading the 2 commandeered ships, while Captains Gordon and Brand led overland expeditions to Bath. Maynard set sail on November 17th with 57 men aboard the 2 armed sloops, slowly making their way along the James River. Meanwhile, Brand's force arrived near Bath on November the 23rd, supported by North Carolinians to counter potential objections. Although Teach was not found in Bath, his imminent arrival was anticipated. Brand's subsequent reconnaissance mission provided crucial information for the impending showdown. On the evening of November 21st, Maynard located Blackbeard's fleet anchored on the inner side of Ocracoke Island. Though he had determined their position from intercepted ships, Maynard, unfamiliar with the local waterways, opted to delay his attack until the following morning. Blocking all traffic from entering the inlet to prevent any warning, Maynard stationed lookouts on both his sloops to prevent Blackbeard's escape at sea. Meanwhile, Blackbeard, hosting guests and with a reduced crew due to Israel hands being ashore, had roughly 25 men on board, despite claiming to have 40. At daybreak, Maynard's sloops, preceded by a small boat taking soundings, entered the channel. The Adventure immediately fired upon the small craft, causing it to retreat back to the Jane. As Maynard's ships closed in, Blackbeard's crew cut Adventure's anchor cable, hoisted sails, and positioned the ship to face Maynard's approaching sloops. With Ranger positioned alongside Jane, and both flying the Union Jack, Adventure steered towards a narrow channel along Ocracoke's island beach. Accounts of the ensuing events vary. According to some, there was an exchange of small arms fire, leading the adventurer to run aground on a sandbar. Others suggest that it was Jane and Ranger that were run aground, although Maynard's log makes no mention of this. Regardless, Adventure turned her guns on the two sloops, unleashing a devastating broadside that inflicted heavy casualties on Maynard's crew. Approximately 1/3 of his forces were killed or wounded, with many on Jane or Ranger suffering casualties. Hyde, commanding Ranger, was among these casualties, leaving his sloop incapacitated for the remainder of the battle. Amid the chaos, it's believed that small arms fire from Jane may have damaged Adventure's sails, causing her to lose control and run aground. With all ships potentially grounded, the battle became a race to see who could refloat their vessel first in the aftermath of Blackbeard's ferocious assault. Maynard had strategically kept many of his men below deck, preparing for the close combat that he anticipated. As the vessels drew near, Blackbeard ordered his men to be ready, observing as Adventure's grappling hooks latched onto their targets, and grenades erupted across the sloop's deck, causing chaos and confusion. Seizing the opportunity, Blackbeard led his men onto Maynard's apparently empty ship, firing at the small group of men who were visible at the stern. However, Maynard's men, who had been laying in wait below deck, suddenly burst forth, shouting, firing their weapons, and catching the pirates off guard. A fierce battle ensued, with both sides fighting across the blood-slicked deck. Blackbeard and Maynard exchanged gunfire with flintlocks before engaging in hand-to-hand combat with cutlasses. Despite Blackbeard's initial advantage, Maynard's superior training and numerical superiority pushed the pirates back. In a desperate move, Blackbeard attempted to deliver a fatal blow to Maynard, but was intercepted by one of Maynard's men, who slashed Blackbeard across the neck. Badly wounded, Blackbeard continued to fight, but was eventually overwhelmed and killed by several more of Maynard's crew. The remaining pirates quickly surrendered, with those left on Adventure captured by Ranger's crew. Accounts of the casualties varied, with Maynard reporting 8 of his men and 12 pirates killed, while Brand reported 10 pirates and 11 of Maynard's men dead. Spotswood claimed 10 pirates and 10 of the king's men dead. After the battle, Maynard examined Blackbeard's body, noting multiple gunshot wounds and numerous cuts. Blackbeard's head was then severed and suspended from the bowsprit of Maynard's sloop as proof of his demise. Upon return to Virginia, Blackbeard's head was displayed on a pole at the entrance of Chesapeake Bay as a warning to other pirates and a signal to passing ships, where it remained for several years. Thank you very much for listening. What an interesting story. Edward Teach, Blackbeard. I would like to say thank you to my Mega Chad tier patron, Stark Factory, who is doing a great job in supporting the channel and keeping me going in my work here on YouTube. If you've enjoyed the content, perhaps you'd consider becoming a patron yourself. Otherwise, just keep enjoying it in whichever way you see fit. as long as you're relaxed. Thank you very much for joining me. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, everyone.